What's going on, y'all? And today I'll be going through all of the traits and origins in set 9.5 so you guys can get a jump start on your rank climb starting this week. So I will briefly talk about each trait and origin, especially the old ones, and then I will go a little bit deeper on the new ones to kind of explain what they do. For those of you guys who didn't get the test on the PvE server, I will go through each of the verticals and I will briefly talk about each unit and tell you what role these units fulfill in these verticals. But if you want to know more about compositions and specific item builds, then I have separate videos for those. Just go over to my YouTube channel. There's a section for it, set 9.5 guides, and I'll be updating that throughout the set. So I got you guys there. So just press that subscribe button and then go over to the channel after this video. That'll really help me out. That'll be awesome. Anyways, let's get started. First up, we have Bilgewater, which is a new trait. So I'm just going to read what it does and then talk about it a little bit. So Biltrat's attacks and abilities mark enemies. The mark stores the percentage of damage dealt to the enemy by Biltrats. Marked enemies are struck by a cannonball after 2 seconds, dealing the stored damage plus a flat value as physical damage. And you can see the vertical is 3, 5, 7, and 9. Something to note is sometimes the devs mess around with these vertical thresholds, but I don't think a lot of these will be changed in this set. And as you can see, the flat damage increases and then the percent stored up. So something important to note about Bilgewater is that you can actually put this on a tank. So you can put this on someone like Shin, and Shin isn't going to like store up a lot of damage, but he can mark them. And then if your MF is dealing damage to them, then MF will store damage. So you can actually, it's really good to have Bilgewater, and you can put those emblems on tanks. It can be great to put the emblems on carries. But yeah, if you want to hit these higher thresholds, it can be very good. And so just looking at the units here, Graves is a carry, also has utility in some rogue builds and that sort of thing. He does a chill with the attack speed. Again, if you want to know more about the units, watch the other video. Alawi is a tank. That's really all she does. TF is a carry. MF is a carry, but has some utility. Nautilus is a tank and utility unit. Nyla is a carry. And then Gangplank is just, he does it all. He's like Senna, if you guys played the last set. He just does everything. He can deal damage. He's good utility, has some good tank stats, that sort of thing. You're good to go. Okay, Darkin. So Darkin got some changes here because now we have 2 Darkins. So Darkins are possessed by a weapon. When they die, the weapon possesses the nearest ally champion, granting them the weapon's power. And then at 2, the weapon's power becomes 50% stronger. And then we have Nefiri and Aatrox. Nefiri and Aatrox are both carries. That's pretty much all they do. But you get some utility from their Darkin passive. So if you want to know more about Nefiri, again, check out the other video. But I'll briefly talk about what it does. So her Darkin Dagger is, she summons these little dogs, and they scale with her star level. So the more higher she is starred up, the more dogs that she will summon. The blade is inside of her, so whenever she casts her ability, these dogs will get summoned and they'll do additional damage. It scales off at AD, so items like Deathblade will make it deal more damage. And then, so it'll come out of her, and then whenever she dies, it'll go to another unit. It's really good with like Noxus and that sort of thing, like units that have really low mana, because once it gets onto your Samira or onto your Cassiopeia, and let's say they have a blue buff, they're just constantly summoning those dogs. They got that dog in her, you know what I'm saying? And then Aatrox, you guys should have played Aatrox. Yeah, Aatrox gives health. So his gives health, and Omnivamp, whenever he dies, passes on. He starts with the Darkin Blade as well. All right, next up is Demacia. Your strongest Demacians become elite and equip a radiant item. Each combat elites grant armor, magic resist to themselves and adjacent allies, so if they're touching on the hex. But this does not stack, so you can't like put 2 Demacian units together and they don't like get 70 armor at 7. So the thresholds right here are actually a little bit different. And I'm not going to try to go through these, go through all the specific balance changes here. These will change. But right now at 7 actually gives you 3 elites, not 4. It was very OP at 4. But anyways, just going through the units here, we have Kale is a carry. That's all that she does. Poppy is a tank, and she has some good utility. Or actually doesn't have utility in this set. She's mainly just a tank. Galio is a tank. Sona is a carry, but also gives some decent utility because she gives your team attack speed whenever she hits them with her ability. Fiora is a carry. Jarvan is a tank and has CC, so good utility. And then Quinn is a carry. Something to note in this vertical that has changed from the last set, if you played the last set, is that Kale is a Slayer. So if you're playing Slayer carry, it's really nice because Quinn is also a Slayer. So you actually don't have to go outside of the vertical in order to get your Kale's trait active. So that is the big change from last set to this set. Typically, whenever you play Demacia, you will play around Slayers. I haven't really seen a lot of Challenger builds with Demacia, except for 3 Demacia in a 6 Challenger board. So Challengers and Demacias kind of go together in that way. And then vertical Demacia, you usually dip into the Slayer vertical more. All right, looking at Freljord. Freljord got some changes from last set, and so let's just read it. So after 8 seconds, an Ice Storm strikes the battlefield. Enemies take a percentage of their max health as true damage and gain debuffs. So this 8 seconds into the fight. At 2, they take 8% of their health and are sundered and shredded. It's actually 30%. It's up to, which puts it in line with Last Whisper, Spark, all those items. So it puts it in line with that. And then at 3, it does 15%, and then they are also stunned. So the big change from last set to this set is at 3, it doesn't mana reave. That was so broken, and it made Freljord was such a problem last set. So now you can't actually hit the 3 naturally. You can only hit the 3 with an emblem or a heart. So that's something that's important there. And then something that's changed with this is Ashe is a Vanquisher. She is not a Deadeye. Deadeye doesn't exist. She no longer pairs with Aphelios. She now pairs with Xayah and Nyla and Jhin. So she pairs with Ionians. So Vanquishers and Ionians kind of go together in this set. And so really you only look for the 2. You don't really go out of your way for the 2 unless you really need it. And then if you have the heart, you can maybe go out of the way for the 3. It is some nice utility, but this is more of a trait that you play when you have to, or you're playing around Vanquishers or Bruisers. It's not something that you really go out of your way to play like you did in the previous set. All right, next up we have Ionia. Each Ionia has a unique bonus within their ability. And let's see if I can remember all of their Ionia bonuses. I probably can. Every 4 seconds, a number of Ionians are enlightened to their spirit form, gaining 20 mana and double stat bonuses for 4 seconds. We have 3, 6, and 9. And as you can see, it changes the number of enlightened units and their Ionia bonus. So let's just go through these units. Aurelia is a tank. And it does tell me their Ionia bonus here, but I could do it from memory. They have armor and she gains armor and magic resist. Jhin is a carry. I'm going to try to do it from memory. He gains attack damage. Set is a tank and has some CC utility. He gains HP. Karma is a carry. She gains AP from her Ionia bonus. Shin is a tank and he gains percent resist from his thing. Yep, damage reduction. And Xayah is a carry. She gains mana per attack. And then Ahri is a carry, and she gains passive mana. She does have some utility because she does mana reave as well. So the big change from Ionia, and before I talk about it, it's really important that you know that all of the Ionians get the bonus. They don't have to be enlightened, but the enlightened units gain the mana and they double the stat bonuses. So all of them get the bonus when the trait is active, but not all of them will be enlightened, if that makes sense. Okay, so the big change from Ionia is Ionia is usually paired with challengers last set. Even though Aurelia is a challenger, they actually pair more with Vanquishers now because Jhin is a Vanquisher and Xayah is a Vanquisher. Those are the premier carries of this vertical. So you want to play around that instead of challenger. Okay, Ixtal, we're actually going to go to a different page to talk about Ixtal, but Ixtal, you gain elemental hexes, which give a different bonus from game to game. Everyone will share the Ixtal and will be in your bottom right corner of your screen at the beginning of the game, so you can check the Ixtal each game. And let's just go over to this screen right here. We're going to talk about each of the Ixtal effects real quick. Sorry about your eyes, it's blinding me as well. So we have Electric Ixtal. The first time an enemy takes damage from an empowered champion's ability, they are stunned for 2 seconds. And then the bonus effect, empowered champions can stun each enemy every 6 seconds instead. So that's when you have 3 active. The bonus effect is when you have 3 Ixtal, or 4 Ixtal. No, it's 4 Ixtal. That's right. The bonus effect is at 4 Ixtal. My bad. So at 3 Ixtal, you gain a second hex. At 2 Ixtal, it is 1 hex. And that hex will change from game to game. Sometimes they'll both be on front line. Sometimes they'll be 1 on front line, 1 on back line. It's pretty random. So this is really good on units that don't already have a stun. And they don't have to be active on the Ixtal unit. So like, for example, if it's electric and you're playing Milio, you don't necessarily want Milio to stand up because he has a stun on his ability. Now he can hit the backline and stun them, so that can be something. But it's really good to like use it on units that don't already have CC. So you don't want to have like Kiana standing on electric because Kiana stuns people. So you would rather it be on a different unit, right? Fire, damage received from an empowered champion's ability, sets enemies ablaze, dealing 45% ability damage dealt as magic damage and burning them 1% of their max health each second. This does not apply Morello. It's just a burn damage, just does some damage over time. The bonus effect fire deals 90% of ability damage and 2% burn instead. So this is good on everybody pretty much. It actually still works on Kayle, who doesn't have an ability. She just has a passive. It works on units like Kayle as well. Cool. And we have Ice. The first time each empowered champion is reduced below 30% HP, they will get covered by a protective layer of ice and will become untargetable. So it's kind of like kind of like they have an Edge and Eye active, right? They will also heal for 30% of their max health over 2 seconds. Bonus effect, after getting frozen, adjacent enemies take 30% of their max health as magic damage. So yeah, this is usually really good if you're playing around the rogues, and the rogues they'll de-aggro, they'll jump to the backline, and then they can additionally de-aggro again. So like you have it both on your Ionia and your Graves can be pretty good there. Also can help your tank, like your main tank, if you have your main tank taking damage, and then they de-aggro, and you have secondary tanks that are going to take damage after that. And then like your Nico can just like recharge all the way back up. It's very nice in that. Okay, Stone and Powered Champions become immune to crowd control effects and reduce incoming damage by 20% for 8 seconds. Bonus effect, Empowered Champions heal for 550 on takedown. Really good to play on your rogues and on your main tank. You'll be good to go with the Stone. Typically not very good on your backliner, but it is nice to be immune to crowd control effects, so that can be nice as well on your backliner. Okay, Wind, the Empowered Champions gain 40% attack speed for 4 seconds at the start of combat every time they use their ability. Bonus effect, bonus attack speed stacks and lasts till the end of combat. So just really good on any carry unit. This is going to be good to go. Really good on Milio in the early game. I find it very good. Okay, Wood. The champions who are empowered by Wood hexes gain 10% max health. At the start of combat, they also gain, it's actually 40 permanent health now, I think, max health, and also grow in size. We all like to grow in size, you know what I'm saying? Bonus effect, every 4 seconds, the empowered champions gain 15 AP and 15% attack damage. So this is really good if you are going to play a unit the whole game. So you can just like play this in general. Like you can put your, you're going to play Ixtal the whole game. Okay, let's buff my Ionia. Let's make my Ionia really tanky, or my Nico. Let's make her super tanky. That can be really nice, and you just stack the health. Additionally, you can play this kind of like some old stacking traits. Like if you guys played older sets and you would have Olaf and you'd have your Olaf go up there and die on purpose and you'd lose rounds and you lost streak, you can kind of play this the same way. I did this the other day. I knew I was playing vertical Ionia and I just played Ixtal because I was weak. And like, let's just lose streak. And I got my set an extra like 500 health. And my set was like a giga tank. It was pretty good. So you can use it in that way as well. Anyways, so let's go back over here. And so looking at the units here, Milio is a carry in utility units. There will definitely be some reroll builds out there where you can main carry him. He has been getting a lot of changes on the PvE because he's kind of an overloaded unit because he has a stun on the front line. The ball bounces, deals some damage, and then has a small AoE, that's a lot of things on a 1 cost. Ionia is a carry and a utility unit. She has a stun and an interrupt, which is quite nice, and a knock-up, so she can pair quite well with Set and Talia, so just know that. And then Nico is primarily a tank right now, but she can deal some damage. She does scale with AP, and I have seen people put Rogue on Nico, and she goes to the back line and pops off, so know that. All right, let's talk about Noxus here. Noxus champions gain health, ability power, and attack damage. This is an increase by 5% for each different opponent they either you have conquered in combat or is dead. And so the maxes out at 35% at the time of making this video, and it's a 3579 vertical. So typically when you play Noxus, I'll just talk about this a little bit, you need to win streak at some point. So like you could play like early game Noxus and win streak if you have upgraded Samira and Cassio. That's really nice. Or you want to win streak on stage 3. Like if you're going to lose streak and then try to reroll Darius or something, reroll Darius and Katarina, you need to pick a time to be strong whenever you play Noxus. It's very important because you need to stack that up. Stack up the Noxus stacks at some point in the game. It's really hard to just pivot in the Noxus at 0 stacks. So you want to stack it at some point in the game, especially if you're going to in-game play Mordekaiser or you want to carry your Darius or whatever. You want to try to stack it at some point. So the thing about Noxus that maybe changed a little bit is Noxus pairs really well with Sharima because Sharima is a 2-piece trait now. And so playing around the core of Samira, Cassio, and Nefiri is really, 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 really nice. So they pair really well with that. It's also really good to like get into Strategist, like you're moving into an Azir build. You can play around Swain. But early game, a lot of times you'll play around Challenger Sharima. And then mid game, you'll play around Juggernaut, maybe some Strategist, that sort of thing. And then in game, if you want to carry Mordekaiser, you also try to pair with Slayers. A good pairing, right? A really easy pairing you can look at is Mordekaiser is a Slayer. Katarina is a rogue, and you know who is a rogue and a slayer? Ionia. And Ionia is a very good utility unit that fits in a lot of build. So eventually you'll pair with those sort of things. Cool. Piltover, you guys should all know about Piltover. Piltover, you gain a T-Hex. Every time you lose a player combat, the T-Hex gains charges. Winning converts the charges to power for the T-Hex and grants you loot based on the number of charges converted. And the more that you lose, the more stacks you gain. So it's good to lose streak and then cash out at one point. So at 3, you gain a TX, and then 6, you almost never hit 6. I've never hit 6 in my life. It's very difficult to hit. You usually need 2 emblems to hit it because you need a Heimerdinger without 2 emblems. Gain bonus 6 loot every round. Each loss counts as 2 instead. So typically when you play Piltover, if you get Piltover 2-1 or 2-5, You want to lose streak all the way to 3-5 or 4-1. Now, if you're playing in low ELO, you can lose streak to 4-1 or 4-2 and you can cash out. If you're playing in even just Master Plus, you probably want to cash out on 3-5. That's how people mess up playing Piltover. They try to cash out at the same time everyone else is rolling. But you need to remember that you're playing a bunch of Piltover units. Like you're playing a Vi on your board trying to cash out when someone else is like completing their vertical Noxus build or their like Strategist Azir comp, and you're going to try to cash out against them. Good luck, buddy. So in low ELO, you can cash out later in the game, but typically you want a full loss streak, lose as many rounds as you can, and then cash out around 3-5, 3-6. And then if you can't, try to cash out on 4-1. But if you're in lower ELO, you can really stretch that longer. The more you lose, the better the cash out is. You get items, and then your TX gets really powerful. Once your TX is over, I believe at this time we make this video, it is 25 stacks. They keep changing it. At 25 stacks, it gets the laser. It might be 20 stacks now. And once you get the laser, he's quite powerful. The TX is quite powerful. Okay, Sharima. Sharima got some changes this time around. So Sharima, every 4 seconds, Sharimans heal 5% maximum health. After 8 seconds, select Sharimans ascend and gain 20% maximum health and 30% attack speed. So let me just talk about the rules on which Shariman will get ascended. It'll first prioritize items. And then if you have even items on carries, or even items on units, it'll be whichever unit you put in most previously. So if let's say you have a 3-star Nasus and not 3-star, 3-item Nasus, 3-item Azir. And if you want Azir to get ascended, you need to make sure, you don't have to do this every round, but you need to make sure he is the most previously one in. So you just, a way that you do this, you'll take him off your board, put him on the bench, and then you'll put him back on the board. And then that'll ensure that your Azir is the one that gets ascended. That is when you only have one ascend. So that's at 2, only one of them will be ascended. At 4, all Sharimans ascend, and you get an additional bonus. At 6, instead, you ascend at the beginning of combat instead of after 8 seconds. So this is a very powerful threshold to hit, and you gain a bonus ascension. And at 9, your units ascend twice. So at the beginning of combat and after 8 seconds, they'll get the bonus twice. So it's very, very, very good. Okay, looking at the vertical here, we already said that Challengers and Sharimans and Noxus fit very well together early game. And then later on to the game, you'll play more around Juggernauts and Strategist. That is going to be your best pairing. You don't really play around Sharima Bastion, but you can play like a Shin to like, Shin is a good pairing with this build if you want to play around 2 Bastion. That can be good to go. So looking at this, Cassiopeia is a carry, but she has some decent utility. Renekton is a tank. Nefiri is a carry and has some utility with her Dark and passive, obviously. Talia is a carry and has some utility with her CC. Pairs very well with Cassante and Set and all those things. So it pairs very well with Juggernauts and Cassante. She'll get some good knockups. Azir is a carry. That's all that he does. He does have some good utility in his trait, but he is a carry. Nasus is a tank. He has some decent utility. He has some carry potential sometimes. And then Cassante is a tank and utility unit. Can sometimes carry your fight, but you don't itemize them as a carry, that sort of thing. Okay, next up is Targon. All your units, healing and shielding is improved. And we have at 2, you see 18% healing and shielding. 3, 4, and 4 right there. Our units are Soraka, who is a utility and carry unit in the Invoker line. We have Tarek, who is a tank. And we have Aphelios, who is a carry. That's all that he really does. Targon pairs very well with the Invoker line and Bastions. So those will be the things that you play around. Invokers and Bastions, usually. And you'll be good to go. All right, Void, get a placeable Void Egg at the start of combat. It hatches into an unspeakable horror and knocks up adjacent enemies. Each Void Star level increases the horror's health and ability power by 25%. At 3, you gain a Void Remora, which is this little egg, this little floating thing. And then at 6, you gain the Rift Herald from League of Legends, and the Rift Herald is quite powerful. The Rift Herald has a little bit of, it charges and hits the first unit. It charges at the furthest unit, hits the first unit, deals a lot of damage, and you're good to go. And then Baron spawns a giant purple worm, and Baron has a bunch of abilities, has some like damage over time effects, has a knock up, and has a bite that it deals a lot of damage. And looking at these, Cho'Gath is a tank and then occasionally can be a carry on reroll. Right now, he is actually a decent reroll build. Malzahar is a carry but has a little bit of utility because he does break shields. Kassadin is a tank and has some decent utility and can carry in his if he has his hero augment. Rek'Sai is a carry. That's all she really does. Vel'Koz is a carry. Kaisa is a carry, and Belvoth is a carry. So typically when you play Voids, it is more of a early and mid-game style trait unless you dip into the vertical, if you have like 2 emblems or whatever. So typically whenever you play Void in the early game, we will play around Sorks and Bruisers, and then you can play around like Tarek is a powerful unit to get in this board, especially if you're playing around Kassadin. Play around Sorks or Bruisers, and if you want to carry Rek'Sai, you will play around Bruisers and Slayers, and then if you want to play 8, you will typically play around either main carrying your Belvoth and or you main carry your Kaisa, so you'll play around Challengers and Bruisers and that sort of thing. You'll be good to go. Okay, Rise. If you want to learn more about Rise, watch my unit video. But Rise is a Wanderer, and his ability changes based off of what portal you are on. Okay, Zon got some changes this time around. So Zon champions create a random Chemtech mod that only they can use. Champions can be modded once, and mods can be removed by benching or selling the champion. So I'm not going to go through every single mod. I'll try to talk about some of them off of memory here, off rip. But what you need to know about chem mods, the first chem mod that shows up will always be a carry mod or a hybrid. So what a carry mod would something be like adaptive implant, which gives you AD and ability power, and things like robotic arm. That's an offensive one, right? So you always get those ones. And then your next one will be can be a tank or utility one, like Hextech Exoskeleton, which makes you CC immune and heal and stuff like that. And then Chemtech, which gives you extra HP, and then you explode on death, dealing some of your maximum health. You will get those at the 4. That'll always be your second or your third mod. It'll never be your first one. So at 2, you gain 1 chem mod. At 4, you gain 2 chem mods, and they're overcharged. So at 4, you can overcharge now, but that's because we have a lot less units in Zon. Before we had 5, and the units paired really well together. These units actually don't pair very well together anymore, except for like Jinx and Warwick pair well together, and Silco and Warwick pair well together. And then obviously if you're playing around Piltover, then they can pair well together, but all 4 of them don't pair that well together. And at 6, you gain 5 chem mods and overcharge them. So the only way to get to 6 is to have 2 emblems or a heart and an emblem. Usually you can only hit that on like Placidium Library, or if you're just like insanely high roll. So yeah, looking at this, we have Jinx is a carry, Warwick is a tank and carry with his hero augment, his Ravenous Hunter augment. Echo is, I don't know what Echo does, man. Like he's built like a carry and like a tank, but like they always make him not strong enough to carry usually, because he's a little bit kind of toxic unit as a carry, honestly. And then Silco is carry and has utility in there. I'll briefly talk about some of the best Zon mods. Like so Robotic Arm is Jinx's best one. Virulent is fine as well. Warwick, Hextech Exoskeleton is good. If you're just like main tanking him, you can do Chemtech. That's fine. But Robotic Arm is pretty good on him, on Ravenous, if you're carrying him and that good stuff, all that good stuff. Echo, I'm not really sure, because Echo is just a really weird unit, if I'm being honest. And then by far, Silco's best is Virulent, but Adaptive Implant is also fine as well. And then, yeah, so just a small tech, like if you get the overcharge, putting Chemtech Overload on a super tank and putting a Warmogs on them, like Jarvan, is very good, because Jarvan jumps into their team and then he explodes all over them. Okay, classes, let's go through these. Bastion champions gain armor, magic resist. This is increased by 100% for each the 10 seconds of combat. So now I will no longer go through each unit and tell you what role they fulfill, because we should have already gotten that with the origins here. So yeah, and then it's a 2, 4, 6, 8 in vertical. Bastions pair very well with Targon, and Aphelios is a very good backline carry. Pairs very well by creating stall comp, so it can pair very well with something like Silco as well, with Sorks, things that need a little bit of stall. Okay, Bruisers right here. And you'll play around Bilgewater's early game, Demacia early game, Voids in the early game are stuff that you usually play around. Okay, Bruisers, your team gains 100 health. So all of your units will gain 100 health. And then Bruisers gain an additional maximum health. So at 2, it's 10%, 4, 45%, 6, 80%. So Bruisers pair very well with Voids in the early game. They pair very well with Sorks in the early game. Pairs well with Piltover. Pairs well with Sharima sometimes. Not really as much right now. And then the only time you'll really go hard into the vertical is if you're carrying one of your Bruisers. So if you're carrying Rek'Sai, or if there's a random patch where Vi can somehow carry. So that is the only time you really dip deep into the vertical. Okay, Challengers. Challengers gain bonus attack speed when their target dies. Challengers dash. So just on a takedown, they don't have to be the one that kills them. If they get attributed in the takedown, challengers dash to the new target and increase their attack speed bonus by 50% for 2.5 seconds. So it makes them really fast. They dash really nice. It's a 2, 4, 6, 8 vertical. A lot of times you will go all the way to the 6. Typically you want to have at least 4 whenever you're playing around a challenger. Fiora can get by with just 2 challenger, but all the other ones you really want to go deep into it if you can to actually carry the line in the end game. So challengers pair really well with Noxus and Sharima in the early game. And then later on in the game, you usually go deep into the vertical and you'll pair with Demacians or Sharimans late into the game, especially if you have an emblem. You can play like Challenger Azir or something like that, or Challenger Mordekaiser, sometimes units that scale really well with attack speed. So usually pair them with. Empress is Belvoth's unique thing. So watch the unit video. Actually, I actually don't talk about her in the unit video. So I'll just briefly talk about this. When Belvoth kills an enemy, they leave behind a Void Coral. She gains maximum health after that, and then she heals after that. She'll heal every time she kills. So she's really good paired with items like Titans. RFC helps her targeting. So a lot of people put RFC. She scales really well with attack speed. RFC, stuff like that is also very good on her. But yeah, things like BT, Titans, Edge of Night, things like that are going to be very good, and you'll be good to go. Or just flat 80 items. Okay, Gunner. When Gunner champions attack, they gain bonus attack damage up to 8 stacks at 2, 4, and 6 right there. So in the early game, you'll typically play, you'll pair with like Juggernauts and that thing and play around Zon with Jinx. That's the time we make this video. Usually when you play Graves, you're playing more around Rogue. Is usually, in Bilgewater is usually a better way to play him. But if you're playing around Jinx, you'll play around Zon and Juggernauts. And then obviously if you're playing around Piltover, and then in game, you'll play around Aphelios and his traits with Targon, Bastions, a lot of tanks and that sort of thing. Something to note about Gunner is they are very good with Runan's Hurricane. So if Runan's Hurricane is a good item in the meta, the Gunners are usually the best users of those because they gain a lot of attack damage and they can spread that in the bolt damage. It can be quite nice. But yeah, this is that's how you play it. Multicasters. So multicasters have their abilities apply multiple effects. Bonus cast have 60% reduced damage. And then so at 2, you gain 1 extra cast. And at 4, you gain 2 extra casts. So when your ability casts, they'll cast 3 times total at 4. And we have Talia, TF, Sona, and Vel'Koz. So in the early game, if you want to play a Talia build, it can pair well with Sharimas and then like Juggernauts with like Set and Nautilus and stuff like that. And you can play around Bilgewater if you have Nautilus on your board with Twisted Fate, that sort of thing. And then if you're playing around Sorks, that's when you'll main carry Vel'Koz and you'll fit your Sona in there. It's a little bit different now because there's not a 4-cost Demacian. So it's a little bit different, but typically you'll play around these 2 units if you're carrying Vel'Koz, and then you can play around like Strategist frontline and maybe do some Demacia tech there. Especially if you have an emblem, can be quite nice. Okay, Invokers. Every 3 seconds your units gain mana. And so at 2, it's 5 to all. 4, it's additional to Invokers. And 6, it's 15 to all, and then an additional 15 to Invokers. And 8, it gets kind of buck wild right there, right? And so typically Invokers will pair really well in the early game. They pair well with Noxus and Ixtal. And then going into mid game, you want to pair it with Bastions and Targon. You'll play a lot around Taric usually. And then once you hit your Shin, you'll play around Bastions and get your Ionia in and that sort of thing. And you'll be good to go. Okay, Juggernaut. Juggernaut champions take less damage. And one thing about Invoker, Invoker is more of a stall type of comp. Your damage comes out pretty slow. So you want to take augments that stall, like Ascension, that sort of thing. Combat Caster, Loving Evocation, Juggernaut champions take less damage as their health decreases. So at 2, 4, and 6, you see it goes up. I think the threshold maxes out at about 50% health. Once you're below 50% health, you're at the maximum threshold. It might be a little bit lower than that. They change that every now and then. So typically, whenever you're playing Juggernauts, you can play around Ionia or you like Gunners on in the early game. You can also play around Noxus if you have your Darius, of course. And then in game, a lot of times, if you're playing a lot of Juggernauts, unless you're playing around, still playing around Set and you're playing Ionian, a lot of times you'll play around Strategist and Sharima. That is like the best way to play it at the time of making this video. Obviously, you can play around Bilgewater and stuff. You probably not get Bilgewater vertical as well. Reaver King, watch the unit guide video to learn more about Reaver King and Gangplank. Rogue, when a rogue falls, it has a 2 and 4. When a rogue falls below 50% health, they briefly become untargetable and dash to an enemy within 4 hexes, preferably a backline unit. And then at 4, a rogue's damage bleeds their target for 75% bonus magic damage over 2.5 seconds. So whenever you position rogues, you typically want to have them on the wings, on the ends right there, so that they jump to the backline units. So they jump to their carries, and you want to separate like 2 on one side, 2 on the other, so that you can always hit their units usually. And a good little tech to do. 2 of these units are magic damage. 2 of them are attack damage. So a lot of times you'll have a Spark on your Echo, and you want to put your Echo next to your Katarina. And then if you have like an Evan Shroud or a Last Whisper on your Graves, you want to put him next to your Kiana so that they're always getting the appropriate shred for their damage type. So that's a good auto tech to have them together. So in the early game, you'll pair this a lot with Ixtal, Bilgewater maybe. Those are going to be a lot of things you'll pair in the early game. And then mid game when you're carrying, you'll pair with Noxus, sometimes Ixtal, and you'll be good to go usually. 4 Rogue is, at the time we make this video, very powerful, so you could reroll around 4 Rogue and Noxus usually. Okay, Slayers. Slayers gain 12% Omnivamp once it's active. They don't have the innate unless they have it active. Slayers deal bonus damage doubled against units below 66% health, and at 2 it is 6%, 4, 20%, 6, 40%, and this will bonus all of your Slayers. So it's very good when you're playing Slayers to play around. If you're going to be carrying Kayle or Quinn, you're playing around Demacian. It's very easy, right? If you're carrying Kiana or Mordekaiser, you'll be playing around Noxus usually. We talked about that pairing earlier on in the game. And then Aatrox, Aatrox, you don't really play around Slayer that much, but if you're going to carry him, then you just put a random Slayer in the in-game. Maybe you're do some Slayer tech, but you don't really worry about Slayer too much on Aatrox and carrying him. I played an Aatrox carry game last night. It's going to go up on the YouTube pretty soon because it was a nutty game. And I played Ionia Aatrox. I didn't even get Slayer in. He was chilling. He was having a good time. Okay, Sorks. Sorks gain bonus ability power when an enemy dies after being damaged by a Sork. They deal a percentage of that enemy's maximum health to another enemy. So it once you kill them, it'll spread to the closest enemy. And this will be all of your Sorks. It'll apply all of your Sorks if your Sorks are on that takedown. So it won't do it 8 times. It's just if a Sork damaged them, it'll do it, right? So at 2, you gain ability power, and then the maximum health damage it deals, and then it just scales up as you go. And then at 6 is when you hit a very powerful threshold. So a lot of games, when you play Sorks, you'll play Sorks with an emblem, because once you hit that 6 threshold without having to play 6 Sorks, 6 actual Sork units, you don't need to have Orianna on your board. That is a very powerful threshold to play around. And there's definitely some 4 Sork builds as well. And so typically when you play Sorks, you'll play a lot around Void in the early game, Void Bruisers, or Void with Kassadin and playing around Bastion. And then in game, you can be playing around that still, play around Bastions usually. But if you're just playing Silco in a strategist build, you'll just play around Silco and Swain to get strategists and that sort of thing. So, and then you can play around Taric with Ionia if you're going to be carrying Ahri in the end game. You can play Ahri, Shin, plus whatever to get your Ionia, and then play around Taric and Targon and that sort of thing. Can be quite good. Okay, combat strategist. So strategist. Combat star allies in the first 2 rows gain a shield for 15 seconds, and allies in the back 2 rows gain ability power. It's actually a quite good utility trait as well, just from the shielding. But a lot of times you'll dip into the vertical, and we have 2, 3, 4, 5. It gets very strong at the vertical, especially if you have an emblem. So typically in the early game, you can play strategist and play around Bilgewater or Noxus, obviously from these units, and around Sorks as well. And then in game, you'll be playing around Juggernauts. They pairs well with Juggernaut, Sharima, Demacia, but the best build in the game right now at the time we make this video is a Juggernaut strategist build where you duo carry Azir and Silco. So those are very good combinations. Techno Genius, I'll briefly talk about this since he is not in my unit guide video, because I only did the unit guide videos only for new units. You gain a placeable Apex turret has 3 upgrade slots. Upgrades to the Apex turret show up in your shop for 6 gold. The Apex turret shares Heimerdinger's attack speed and ability power. So let's just talk about which each of the upgrades do. You can have Reparo. Reparo gives armor and magic resist to your turrets, and the more of them you buy, if you buy 3 Reparos, then it makes it very, very, very tanky, and you put it on the front line, and what will happen, it'll be a tank for your team. It'll still deal a little bit of damage. It'll die, and then it'll repair itself over time. It's like an 8-second duration or something like that, and it can re-aggro, so it can be a double tank. So it's really good if you have a lot of tankiness. It can de-aggro, can re-aggro again. It can be just really good if you just really need some front line and just toss that in there. You also additionally will have Mechanostorm. Mechanostorm applies a healing reduction effect, and it'll also, every 3rd attack, it'll spread. It'll do a little cone damage. So it's really good to have at least 1 always, unless you're going to go triple Reparo, because it'll add that spread. Even if you don't need the healing reduction, just a spread is very nice. And that is why Heimerdinger is very good with attack speed, like RFC, Rageblade, Shiv, that sort of thing, because the more the turret attacks, the more it'll do that effect. And then the more you buy of that, the more damage it'll deal, and the more flat damage and the percent damage. So a lot of times if you're carrying Heimerdinger, you'll go triple Mechano, or you can go 2 Mechano, 1 Shrinko. And at Shrinko, you shrink the size of the people you hit. Doesn't really matter about shrinking their size. That's not really a big deal. But it does shred and sunder them. The more you buy, the more of the effect that it has applying the shred and sunder. A very common combination of this is like 2 Shrinko, 1 Mechano, 2 Mechano, 1 Shrinko, or triple Mechano on carry Heimerdinger. Additionally, there is Goldenator. Goldenator you play when you're really far ahead. That's a win more situation. And a lot of times you'll go 1 Goldenator plus 2 Mechano. You'd always want to have Mechano active on Goldenator because you can get that cone effect and that burn. And when you're ticking them down, it can trigger the effect. So typically you'll never go 3 Goldenator. But you can go 2 Goldenator, 1 Mechano if you're really far ahead. But that's a win more situation. And Heimerdinger is just great in any comp, really. Okay, Vanquisher, damage from Vanquisher's abilities, critically strike. Vanquishers gain bonus critical strike chance and critical strike damage. So as you can see, 2, 4, and 6. You can still build an Infinity Edge because you will get the bonus damage, but it's not the best thing to do. Usually when you play Vanquishers, you want to have a little bit of crit so that you can like always crit and scale up your crit damage as well. So like building an item like a Last Whisper on your Xayah can be quite nice, even though she's already in a crit and she has some base armor shred in there. It can add on to that effect. But in items like Guardbreaker or like Hodge can help bonus your effect. And if you have to build IE, it's fine to build IE. So typically Vanquishers, you'll play around Ionia pretty much the whole game, or you can play around Bilgewater once you get to the end game. You can also play Vanquishers if you're like rerolling Darius and just add a random Ashe in there. You play around Juggernauts, that sort of thing, and you'll be good to go. Vanquisher is one of the premier carry traits of the set. All right, guys, that's pretty much it for the video. And again, check out the channel, check out the guide section. If you know me squirming over here, I gotta pee, man. But we got through this stuff. I wasn't rushing through anything to get this done. I do what I can for the content. Anyways, that's it for me. Check out my live stream, check out the guides, go to the channel, press the subscribe button. I appreciate you guys, and I'll see you on the next one.